In Belfast, place names matter more. These were the scenes around Duncarn Gardens, Tigers Bay, North Queen Street, all in the same area of North Belfast last night. At one point, a car was hijacked, set on fire and pushed into the police line. 3 14-year-old boys were arrested. 14 police officers were injured, bringing the total number of officers injured over a week of street violence to 88. So this is the scene in Tigers Bay in North Belfast tonight. A car was set on fire. A few hundred young people had a standoff with the police just here on the corner. Earlier today, of course, loyalist community groups had asked for people not to demonstrate, not to protest out of respect for the passing away of Prince Philip. Unfortunately, this is what happened. Earlier in the week, I have to say, Belfast was really bracing itself for some serious violence tonight. Although this looks bad, it is not as bad as people were expecting. So, for example, the worst of the violence this week took place on Wednesday night in West Belfast. This was the scene there yesterday. After the death of Prince Philip, loyalists postponed demonstrations. Posters like these went up on the Shankill Road. Where trouble did flare, it was very local and involved very small numbers of people. Most were just spectators, some parked up watching from cars. Drive-through, recreational riot watching. Politicians have spent the week condemning the violence, and rightly so. Solid suggestions for a way out of this have been in shorter supply.
Well, you've got to look through the smoke to find the fire.
The Good Friday Agreement was signed 23 years ago to the day. This man's been watching the journey for over 3 decades now.
If you want to identify the real anger and concern within the unionist loyalist community, it's post-Brexit, it's the REC border, and it's that sense now of further distance and difference being created between this place and the rest of the United Kingdom. And the union no longer as safe as it once was, and certainly not as safe as it was when declared such by the Combined Loyalist Military Command in 1994.
The people saying that this week is a return to the bad old days don't know how bad the old days were. Take Drumcree, thousands of loyalists in a standoff with security forces over marches. At the time, one of the people who helped untie the knot that was on fire was this man, and his assessment of the challenge now for loyalism and unionism.
You've got to go behind the labels and ask, what does loyalism represent? Why is it important to say, I am a loyalist or I am a unionist? Is it important?
Why is that?
Is it important simply to defend history, to defend what's happened, what's brought them to this point? Or is it important to say, what is the contribution that being a loyalist or being a unionist can make to the current situation after Brexit?
In other words, post-Brexit, with the union looking shaky, what is the future for the teenagers of Tigers Bay? And not only the teenagers, the toddlers as well.
Well, earlier I spoke to Lord Dodds of the Democratic Unionist Party, who used to represent North Belfast in the House of Commons, the constituency where a lot of the trouble in recent days has been centred. I began by asking him for his own thoughts about Prince Philip.
No, I think he was a great help and support to Her Majesty the Queen, and was a counterbalance to all the formal duties that she had to perform. And he was greatly loved in Northern Ireland along with Her Majesty, and he visited Northern Ireland over 50 times along with the Queen, and sometimes on his own.
And what do you know about his feelings towards Northern Ireland? Because, as you say, he visited an awful lot, but there was a troubled relationship there with the killing of his uncle, Lord Mountbatten. Well,
yes, I mean, he was personally touched by the terrorist campaign, as so many people in Northern Ireland have been. I think that's what bound people in Northern Ireland closer to him and to the royal family, because they too were touched. I mean, he, like Her Majesty, demonstrated enormous grace and courage in the face of all that adversity, and demonstrated a better way forward. by seeking to promote reconciliation and a better future for Northern Ireland based on parties working together at Stormont.
Let me turn now to the violence that we have continued to see on the streets of Belfast. There was a call saying people must stop and respect the death. They didn't stop. Why not?
It is a very sad situation. It's an appalling situation, and clearly we hope that it ends. There's been a completely clear, united call across all the political parties and across all community leaders for the violence to end.
Why do you think they are rioting, though? What do you put it down to?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. The decision by the Public Prosecution Service not to prosecute leading Sinn Féin members for their attendance at a mass IRA funeral a number of months ago. And the reasons, one of the reasons was because the police had effectively worked with Sinn Féin in terms of the organisation of that. That went down extremely badly, has caused a lot of tension. Some people have taken the law into their own hands wrongly. And of course, then the context of the issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which many unionists are concerned about, but which doesn't justify violence on the streets. So look, there's a context to all of this, but all of these issues need to be worked through politically.
There are people pointing to you also, saying you are not showing a lack of leadership. Because if we talk about Brexit, for instance, the DUP backed Brexit. You honoured Boris Johnson at your conference, and now you see the result and you're saying that you've been betrayed.
No, well, on Brexit, of course, unionists in Northern Ireland voted overwhelmingly for Brexit across all the parties, not just the DUP. And people in Northern Ireland have the same right to expect that Brexit be honoured across the United Kingdom as everywhere else. It was a referendum of the whole of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, not just part of it. And with the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was imposed by those who were demanding, basically the Remain side, demanding that Northern Ireland be kept in the single market and the customs union, has led to this very, very great escalation of tension, which is now recognised by the Secretary of State, recognised by many senior members of government and commentators, that this is an untenable position, because we now have a situation where, as a result of the machinations of Remainers and those who said that Brexit shouldn't be allowed to happen for Northern Ireland, where laws will now be made in Brussels for Northern Ireland without anyone at Stormont or anyone at Westminster having any say over them. Now, in a modern Western democracy, how is it that the only place in the world where laws will be set by no one democratically elected within that jurisdiction is going to be part of the United Kingdom? That's an untenable position. And it's one that any reasonable person would recognise is unsustainable.
Well, Brexit has happened and it's not turned out well for you. Do you think you were naive in believing Boris Johnson?
Well, Brexit hasn't turned out well on a number of fronts, according to many people. But for Northern Ireland, the reason why we have the problems we have is those who advocated an arrangement for Northern Ireland, which was different from the rest of the United Kingdom. The DUP and unionists did not advocate that. It was people on the Remain side and nationalist parties. And unfortunately, what we have now is a situation where there are checks between internal trade within the United Kingdom in order to stop any checks happening between the United Kingdom and the rest of the European Union on the island of Ireland. Now, if checks are wrong because they may lead to violence, and the threat of violence has been used in this by nationalist parties and implicitly by the EU by saying that you couldn't possibly have any such checks on the island of Ireland that would lead to violence, why is it acceptable to have them between Northern Ireland and Great Britain?
Nigel Dodds, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.